Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and how are you doing today? I hope you are all doing very well. I wanted to touch base with you, and in particular, if I may, I'd like to approach you with a particular issue that I have recently run into. It's a very nice issue to run into, I think. That's one of the nice things about being a fan of cinema, is that you run into certain issues like this. And it's this. I have professed on many occasions to liking a particular film and claiming it to be my absolute favorite film of all time. And that film is Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. The film Vertigo, if you haven't seen it, is one of those films that I cannot get enough of. I've seen the film, I think, more times than I can count. I simply adored the film ever since I saw it for the first time when I was younger. This was before the film had been restored. I don't know if you recall, but I think it was around the 90s or so, the mid to late 90s. I forget the exact date, but there was a real major restoration that took place with respect to Vertigo. And I was in love with the film even then. I remember seeing the film, the restored version, in the theaters when it was originally released. And I saw it many times in the theater. I was enchanted. I was absolutely in love with the film, and I was enchanted and totally absorbed by the real hypnotic, mesmerizing nature of the film. I mean, I grant you that it's a very warped plot. It's a very odd plot. It's quite it's conspicuously outrageous and outlandish in many respects. But this is a fine example of the plot almost is secondary. I mean, I always think that the plot of Vertigo is itself the MacGuffin of the film, and that the actual point of the film is everything outside of the plot, if you know what I mean. And so this is, for me, the one of the great films of cinema, and it's always been my favorite film. And I've seen the film, as I said, more times than I can count. I've probably seen it at a pace of maybe once a month, and so it's been a film that I can never tire of, and even to this day, I cannot tire of this film. This has always been the film that I mention as being my favorite film ever, if people have asked me. But now, I must preface this by saying I haven't made up any decision yet, but very recently I was revisiting a film that I also love very much. It's a film that is quite high on my favorite film list ever. And this is a film that I was watching recently because I was trying to put together some thoughts in respect of a question that I received from a viewer. And the viewer's question was about films that I thought were in particular quite moving to me. And I'm putting together my thoughts on that, and hopefully I'll put a video together and upload it in the near future. My top 5 or top 10 most moving films for me, or something like that. But in any event, I was thinking about that, and in the process of thinking about that, I was rewatching this other film that I thought was so moving. I've always thought it was such a moving film. And I watched it, and it suddenly dawned on me. And it was like my own personal epiphany, which was this other film that I saw and that I've always loved and cherished. It could quite possibly also be my favorite film of all time. In other words, up to now I've always claimed Vertigo to be my favorite film of all time, but now there seems to be another film that could potentially occupy the same space or compete in my mind and in my heart, compete with the film Vertigo as being my favorite film of all time. And so I should preface here by saying I haven't made up my mind yet, but the film that I resaw recently, and I just was absolutely, I've always been in love with this other film. And so it's a very difficult thing, but I saw this film again recently, which is Late Spring, Yasujiro Ozu's Late Spring. And I've always found this film to be so tender and so moving and deeply, deeply warm and quite overpowering. And it's very emotionally devastating in many respects. It is very quiet, and it's when it has this way of creeping up on you. And then when the moment of quiet emotional devastation comes, oh boy, it's like a sledgehammer. So this film is one that I've always loved, and I've always considered it to be maybe in my, whatever it is, my top 3, perhaps, top 5 or top 3 favorite films of all time. But watching it again recently has made me realize that perhaps I like it more than I've given it credit over the whatever it is, the past several years. So now I've begun to think, maybe I like this film as much as, if not perhaps more than, the film Vertigo. And so I'm now thinking in my head and in my heart, which film do I cherish more? Now, this is I think it's a very personal, intellectual kind of exercise, in the sense that in the end, it doesn't mean much to anyone except myself. So whatever answer that I come up with, it doesn't affect anyone else's pleasure in watching any of these films. And it certainly wouldn't affect mine. If I decided that one film was something that I thought was my favorite over another, that still wouldn't affect my watching of the film that lost out, if you know what I mean. I'll still love both of them very much, but it's just a nice little exercise to play around with in my head. Which film do I like more? Do I like Late Spring, or do I like Vertigo? Up to very recently, I thought I would always say Vertigo, because it was almost second nature to me, just how much I adore this film. But I think, not to take anything away from the film Vertigo, which I still think is one of it's like Mount Everest, or it's like it's whatever it is, the creme de la creme, and it is the summit of so many things that are just great in cinema. I still think that way, but perhaps this is potentially, I'm not sure yet, but this is perhaps potentially eclipsing my feelings towards this film. And thus, this is perhaps beginning to occupy that space in my heart, which, I don't know, could this be my new favorite film ever, Late Spring? I'm not sure. In either event, it's a nice little battle that's going on in my mind at the moment. So, and again, whatever I decide, it really, in the end, doesn't mean much. So, but if anyone out there is interested, and please, I'm not going to be offended if you're not interested, but for anyone who is interested, if you want to impress me, or if you want to, how should I put it? If you want to find a way to my heart, all you have to do is watch Late Spring and Vertigo. And because these are perhaps, whatever it is, whatever is number 1 and number 2, you'll still have the number 1 and number 2 films here, as far as my favorite films are concerned. So either one is fine by me. But if you watch either one of or both of these films, and you let me know, then I will be so happy. that will make me so happy indeed. That is a surefire way to my heart, if ever there was one. You telling me that you saw Late Spring and Vertigo and that you really liked both of them. That would be an extra. That would be like a cherry on top of the icing. So that would be that's the way to my heart. In case you're interested, but in any event, this is a very interesting sort of dilemma that has emerged very recently for me. So I must ask you, has this ever happened to you before? In other words, have you ever had a film that you've generally claimed and professed as being your favorite film of all time, to then have something come in to your heart and mind to the effect that you feel like there's a new film? In other words, do you find that you change your mind a lot when it comes to what film you consider to be your favorite film of all time? Or do you generally find that it's the same film? Or perhaps you feel like having a favorite film of all time it's not a worthwhile endeavor, right? Because maybe for some of you, maybe it's not having one or two or three favorite films in a list, but rather having a group of films, enjoying films based on your mood and feeling, which can change over time and depending on the day and the seasons. I perfectly get that, and that is a really nice and a great reflection of the lovely thing about human nature. Human nature is, by its very nature, it's complicated and it's complex, and it can hold, what's the phrase? It can hold two or more seemingly contradictory ideas and still function. So this is all to say that you can have, I think, a group of films that you consider your favorites without necessarily feeling like you have to rank them in some order. But then there are others who think that ranking is a good exercise because it's a way to try to figure out exactly what it is about a film that you like. And I think for a lot of people, myself included, it's very nice to try to compare something with something else because the way to do that, comparing is a way also of connecting with something. And in the words of E.M. Forster, right, only connect. So this is, I think, in your whatever approach you espouse, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor and a great approach. But for those of you who maybe think about your favorite film of all time, I must ask you, do you find that you change your mind a lot, or do you find that you're pretty constant with the film that you elect as your own personal favorite? I'd love to know, because I must admit that this is the first time that this has happened to me in terms of what I thought was my favorite film of all time. And so I'm right. Whenever I think of ranked lists or top 10 lists, of course I tend to change my mind a lot about those lists. I think I mentioned that before. But when it comes to my favorite film of all time, I've always said Vertigo, because Vertigo has always been the film that I can watch every time, and it just hits me in a way that no other film, I think, can. But until very recently, right? Because now I realize that perhaps Late Spring has the same power, or perhaps has an even greater power over me and over my senses and sensibilities than Vertigo does. Who knows? This is something for me to consider and ponder. So while I consider this further, and while I try to figure out exactly where these films figure in my own approach and in my own sensibilities, in the meantime, my friends, if you have any comments or questions or stories that you want to share with me about how you came up with your own favorite film of all time, and how perhaps that might also have been the result of much debate and thinking on your part, and perhaps, who knows, maybe you find that you change your favorite film of all time maybe once or twice or over many occasions, who knows. If that's the case, I would love to hear what your story is and what your approach is and how you try to figure that out, because, a favorite film is something that is, I think, quite important to those of us who are in the film-loving community, because it's a part of who we are, and it's an indication of what kind of person I think we are. And I think there's so many things that go into the reflection of what our favorite film could be. It could be a reflection of something that is very highly personal in our life that happened, and maybe we connect a very crucial, critical memory with the watching and enjoyment of a particular film. Maybe it's an element or a number of elements within a film that awakens something within us that is so crucial and critical and so close to what it is that makes us who we are. Who knows? All these things, I think, are very deep and potentially mysterious, and only you know exactly why your favorite film works on you the way it does. So therefore, it's a very personal thing, this choice. And then to have the choice be subject to change, I think, is also equally a fascinating discussion and debate about why it is that you feel like you want to change that film from one film to another film. Was there some kind of life event that occurred? Was there some palpable, stronger memory associated with the new film that makes you more eager to want to appreciate that film more than the other film? Or, all these things are examples of the kind of dynamic flow of consideration that one can give with respect to this particular issue. And as I say, it's a very personal thing. It's an incredibly personal thing, and it's a reflection of you as a human being and your character. And it's also something that you perhaps it's one of the things that you tell other people as a means of sharing with us just the kind of cinephile you are and also the kind of person you are. So I think it's a very important and lovely thing to talk about. So if you have any comments about that, what is your favorite film and how has it changed, or has it been relatively constant over time? I'd love to hear about this. I really would. I think it would be so helpful for me, and just such a nice illustrative and insightful discussion that I could have with you, and you could continue to teach me those things about cinema that you really love, and that teaching will help me further in my own pursuit and my own journey. Okay, my friends, so sorry about this extended video, so I hope you can forgive me, but it's something that I've just thought about recently, so I hope I wasn't too much of a burden on your precious time today. In the meantime, my friends, I hope you are well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great films. Until we meet again, my friends. Cheers.